Everyone in New York City knew Sarah Foster had pursued Daniel Anderson for 7 long years, waiting until she was 30 to finally marry her first love, a man 8 years her junior. But just 3 years into their marriage, she had a change of heart. By the time Daniel heard the news, Sarah's obsession with a young environmental activist, Leo Miller, was already the talk of the town, a scandal known to all. Leo, it was said, came from a poor family and had mediocre grades, yet he possessed a grand ambition to make protecting the environment his life's mission. To achieve his dream, he had boldly dropped out of college, spending his days at climate protests and walkouts. His Facebook feed was a constant stream of global warming and species extinction. He had sternly rejected Sarah's flowers and gifts, declaring, "Compared to the great cause of environmental protection, romantic love is utterly insignificant." That single sentence was all it took for Sarah to fall for him, and she vowed to help him achieve his dream. She arranged exclusive interviews for Leo with reporters and used the Foster family's influence to get him a speech at the UN Climate Change Conference, forcibly molding him into the face of environmentalism that political figures and celebrities were all eager to praise. For Leo, Sarah willingly picked up trash in a couture gown. She shut down Foster Industries' combustion engine plant, letting the company's market value plummet by tens of millions. She even leveraged her power to force dozens of so-called polluting factories into bankruptcy. Every insane thing Sarah did for Leo made Daniel feel as if a part of his heart had been hollowed out. He stumbled into the study, demanding to know why. Sarah said nothing, simply picking up a glass of whiskey. Just as she was about to take a sip, she remembered how much Daniel despised her drinking. She hesitated, then set the glass down. Her eyes met Daniel's, steady and without a hint of panic, yet filled with a dark, profound emotion he couldn't decipher. "Because Leo is the love of my life. Daniel, meeting him made me realize you can't just settle in love." Daniel's face went white, a chill seeping through him as if he'd been plunged into ice water. Her expression was dead serious. "Our families have been allies for generations. This stable union is good for both of us. I won't divorce you, but my heart belongs to Leo and Leo alone." The love of her life? Then what was he? And what about the 7 years Sarah had spent painstakingly waiting for him to become a man? Daniel's right hand clenched the corner of the desk, a wave of immense grief rising from his gut to his throat, choking off any words. He couldn't believe that Sarah, the woman who had loved him for a decade, could have her heart turned so suddenly. He tried to reassure himself that this was just a phase for Sarah. Once she realized the young activist Leo was all talk and no substance, she would come back to him. But what Daniel got instead was Sarah moving Leo Miller into the Foster estate and demanding the entire household follow his directives to aid the environmental cause. She even gave Leo the general manager position at Foster Industries, a role that had been meant for Daniel. The day after Leo became the GM, Daniel received a frantic call from his parents. Foster Industries had abruptly suspended its joint nuclear power project with Anderson Corporation. The Andersons had poured all their liquid assets into the venture. Halting it now meant immediate bankruptcy. Daniel did his best to calm his frantic parents and rushed straight to Foster Industries. He found Leo painting an environmental poster. After hearing Daniel's pleas, Leo slowly added a final stroke of green paint before speaking coolly. "Absolutely not. Nuclear power is a serious atmospheric pollutant. Any project that trades environmental destruction for financial gain must be stopped." Daniel's pupils constricted in disbelief. The absurdity was overwhelming. "What are you talking about? The Anderson family is on the brink of collapse. Without the Foster support, we'll go bankrupt. Are you going to let thousands of people lose their jobs and their livelihoods?" Leo turned slowly, his eyes sharp and furious. "Mr. Anderson, the fall of Anderson Corp is just one company going under. Those people will only lose their jobs. But if that nuclear plant is built, tens of thousands of species will face extinction. Can't you see which is the greater tragedy? So, not only will I refuse to approve this project, I'm going to lead a sit-in protest at the site." As he finished speaking, Daniel got a clear look at the poster Leo had been painting. It was a bold manifesto against the nuclear power project. Without a second thought, Daniel moved to block Leo, lunging forward to grab the poster. "No, I won't let you do this." The two of them grappled, stumbling into each other. In the chaos, the carefully painted poster was ripped cleanly in two. Just at that moment, Sarah rushed in, drawn by the noise. Her face fell the instant she saw Leo, his hair disheveled, his clothes wrinkled, and several red marks on his cheek. She grabbed his hand, her voice soft with concern. "Leo, are you all right?" Leo gazed at her with a look of deep affection and recounted his version of events. "Sarah, it's not Mr. Anderson's fault. He was just worried about his parents. It's a shame about the poster I worked on all night. But I can't just stand by and watch the Andersons continue down a path of ecological destruction." At his words, Sarah's gaze turned to ice. She stared directly at Daniel, who stood there looking lost and pale, and her voice was laced with frost. "Guards, take Daniel to the cellar. Let him think about what he's done. He is not to leave that room without my permission." Then she looked up at Leo, her tone softening completely. "Leo, it's almost time. Let's head out together." Daniel stared at Sarah, his voice trembling with disbelief. "Sarah, have you lost your mind? You know perfectly well that nuclear power is far cleaner than coal. That project is my parents' life's work, and you're just going to let Leo destroy it? Do you really love him this much?" Sarah's expression remained unmoved, her tone absolute. "That's enough, Daniel. I promised Leo the first would give my full support to his environmental work. It's the only way he'll agree to be with me." She waved a dismissive hand, and guards moved forward to forcibly drag away the stunned Daniel. "Sarah, let me go. He can have my position. Just please, save the Anderson family," he yelled. "You love him, don't you? I'll step aside. I'll give you my blessing." Hearing this, Sarah's eyes flashed with cold anger. "Daniel, stop making a scene." With that, she turned and walked away with Leo. No matter how much Daniel struggled, his phone was taken and he was locked in the cellar. In the endless dark, he felt himself sinking alone into an abyss. How had it come to this? Just a short while ago, she was the woman who loved him more than life itself. The Fosters and the Andersons were old family friends, their marriage arranged since they were children. Sarah was 8 years older than Daniel, and they had grown up together as childhood sweethearts. Sarah had always been his protector. She was the first person to notice his peanut allergy, the first to realize he was claustrophobic, the first to patch him up after a fight, and she was the very first person to kiss him. For 20 years, Sarah had cared for Daniel like a devoted older sister, waiting patiently for him to become a man. At their wedding, as she slid the ring onto his finger, her eyes were filled with profound love. "Daniel, I will love you with all my life. I will love you until the mountains crumble and the heavens fall." Now, he thought, she had probably long forgotten those words. Daniel curled into a ball in the corner, burying his face in his knees. His claustrophobia was setting in, and a wave of pure, escalating terror washed over his mind, making his whole body shake. The next morning, the cellar door was thrown open. A guard handed him back his phone. Daniel immediately tried to call his parents. But after nearly 50 calls, there was still no answer. A dark premonition settled in his gut. He stood up quickly and headed for the door, only to come face to face with Leo Miller, who stood a short distance away with a grave expression. Daniel was about to rush past him to find his parents, but he stopped dead when he saw what Leo was holding. "Is that?" he started. Leo held up an emerald necklace and a mechanical watch. "Mr. Anderson," he said flatly, "these are your parents' last effects." A sharp ringing exploded in Daniel's ears, and for a moment, he couldn't hear a thing. "What did you say?" Leo's expression was unchanged, his tone as placid as if he were discussing the weather. "There was an accident during the protest yesterday. I was planning to burn down the plant, but the fire grew more intense than I expected and triggered an explosion. Unfortunately, your parents were killed. My condolences." Daniel felt a pain so sharp, it was as if 1,000 arrows had pierced his heart. He stumbled, catching himself on the wall to keep from falling. Leo continued, unconcerned. "The fire was intense. By the time they found your parents, there was nothing left but their bodies and these 2 items. Since cremation contributes to air pollution, I took the liberty of arranging a green burial for them." As he spoke, he played a video on his phone. On the screen, Daniel's parents' bodies were fed into an industrial shredder, pulverized into dust, and packed into a biodegradable bag. Then, like a piece of trash, the bag was tossed into the ocean. It felt as if someone had slammed a hammer into the back of Daniel's head. The world spun violently. A gut-wrenching grief seized his heart, and he couldn't breathe. When his vision cleared, his eyes were bloodshot as he drove his fist hard into Leo's face. Leo staggered and fell, a look of shock and fear on his face. Daniel lunged at him like a man possessed, raining down punches and kicks with all the strength he had. Sarah saw what was happening and immediately signaled her guards, who violently threw Daniel off Leo. "Daniel," she cried, pulling Leo behind her protectively, her eyes as cold as a frozen sea. "Your parents' death was an accident. It has nothing to do with Leo. What do you think you're doing? If it's that big a deal, I'll acquire Anderson Corp and transfer all the shares to your name as compensation." A scene? Compensation? A sneer spread across Daniel's face. He let out a low, bitter chuckle that grew into a wild, hysterical laugh, a sound more painful than any sob. So this was the line between love and indifference. It was so painfully clear. The two lives of his parents were worth less than a single cough from a man in her arms. Daniel stared at the woman he had loved for 7 years, a violent tickle rising in his throat. He coughed, spitting a spray of blood onto the floor, the force of it making him collapse. Sarah tensed, but when she felt Leo squeeze her hand, she hesitated. Daniel struggled to his feet and stumbled over to Leo, holding out a hand. "Give me my parents' things. Give them back to me." At some point, his hands had been cut, and blood was now dripping from his palms. Leo, with Sarah's help, slowly got to his feet. He clutched the items tightly and said coldly, "I'm sorry, Mr. Anderson. I've already promised to auction these for an environmental charity. All proceeds will go to the cause." Daniel lunged for them, but at a signal from Sarah, guards grabbed his arms and held him back. Her expression was frigid. "Daniel, it seems I've spoiled you rotten. Leo said he's raising money for charity. Didn't you hear him? For charity, you say?" Daniel laughed softly, a mocking sneer twisting his lips as he stared at Leo. "I'll help you with that." Gritting his teeth, he wrenched his wedding ring from his finger. The sound of his knuckle breaking was sickeningly sharp. As if he felt nothing, Daniel held the ring out to Leo. "A South African blue diamond. It's worth a fortune. I'll trade you this. Just give me back what's left of my parents." Sarah's face instantly darkened, a sharp glint in her eyes as she opened her mouth to speak. But Leo cut her off. "Very well, Mr. Anderson, on behalf of environmentalists everywhere, thank you for your generous contribution to the cause." Seeing his acceptance, Sarah forced herself to hold her tongue. Daniel carefully took the necklace and watched from him, then turned and walked away without a backward glance. Leo beamed at Sarah. "This is wonderful, Sarah. Once we sell this ring, the organization will have enough funding to continue its work for months." For once, Sarah didn't respond to him, her eyes fixed on Daniel's retreating back. After a long moment, she turned back with a smile and took the ring from Leo's hand. "Leo," she said gently, "I'll handle the auction." He smiled and nodded. After leaving the Foster estate, Daniel hailed a cab and rode it all the way to the coast. He stared out at the vast, churning ocean, where his parents' ashes had long since vanished. He fell to his knees on the sand, his vision blurring with tears. He could almost see his wedding day, his parents beaming at Sarah, whose own eyes were filled with nothing but him. He remembered their words. "Daniel, Sarah waited 7 years for you. If you ever dare to fail her, we'll never forgive you." His parents had treated her like their own daughter, had cherished her. And this is how she repaid them? Thinking of his parents, not even a body left to bury, a terrible, grief-stricken cry was torn from Daniel's throat. He knelt there on the beach, his right hand twisting the fabric at his chest, his left hand braced against the sand. A visceral, gut-wrenching pain tore through him, radiating from his heart to every last nerve ending. Every breath was an agony. Tears streamed from his eyes. Sarah, the woman who had promised to love him forever, had broken her vow. His parents, who had loved and cherished him more than anyone, were gone. In a single day, the two families he called his own had been shattered. His heart completely hollowed out. Daniel went to his lawyer's office to have divorce papers drawn up. Then, with the papers in hand, he went to the police station. At the NYPD precinct, Daniel's first words were enough to startle the desk sergeant. "I want to report a crime. I'm accusing Leo Miller of premeditated murder and desecration of human remains." When the police brought Leo Miller into the precinct, he didn't look the least bit afraid. The moment he saw Daniel was the one who had reported him, his brow furrowed in annoyance. "Mr. Anderson, what is this all about?" Daniel shot him a look, then turned to the officer. "His phone contains a video of him desecrating my parents' bodies. I also heard him admit, with my own ears, that he set the fire. There were security cameras at the site where my parents died. I'm sure the footage will corroborate my story." Leo looked at him with pity and sighed softly. "Mr. Anderson, As I told you, your parents' death was an accident. More than that, it was nature's punishment. I thought their fate would have clearly demonstrated the consequences of disrespecting the natural world. I see you're still refusing to see the truth. An officer took Leo's phone and searched through it for several minutes, but found no such video. Mr. Anderson, there's no video like that on Mr. Miller's phone. In disbelief, Daniel grabbed the phone and searched for it himself, remembering exactly where it had been. But it was gone. That's impossible. It was right here. A small smirk played on Leo's lips. Mr. Anderson, I'm a renowned environmentalist. I wouldn't even hurt an animal, so how could I possibly commit murder? You can hate me all you want, but you shouldn't stoop to slander. Daniel stared at Leo's smug expression, his hands balling into fists. Officer, there's still the security footage from the site. The police pulled the surveillance tapes from the area and went through them frame by frame, but they came up with nothing. Daniel felt a frantic twitching at the edge of his nerves as his mind went completely blank. At that moment, a commotion erupted outside the precinct's front doors. An officer ran inside. We got a problem. There are 100 environmental activists protesting outside, accusing the department of abuse of power, and dozens of news crews are out there. They heard we arrested the Eco Kid and are demanding a statement. The faces of every officer in the lobby fell. They all rushed outside to control the crowd. Before Daniel could even process what was happening, he saw Sarah striding in on her high heels, her face a thunderous mask. She walked right past Daniel and rushed to Leo's side, her voice filled with concern. Leo, are you all right? I contacted several media outlets and environmental groups to put pressure on the department. They haven't been giving you a hard time, have they? Leo shook his head. I'm Fina, Sada. Sarah then shot Daniel a look that could kill, her voice trembling with rage. Daniel, haven't you caused enough trouble? Daniel looked at her indifferent face, and his heart filled with a bleak sorrow. He spoke slowly, his voice raw. Caused enough trouble? Leo Miller set a fire that killed my parents, then had their bodies brutally destroyed. Is there something wrong with me reporting that to the police to seek justice? Sarah's expression was terrifyingly dark. You really are incorrigible. Do you have any idea how much trouble you've caused Leo by reporting him? He has sacrificed so much for the cause, only to be dragged through the mud because of you. I want you to withdraw this report right now, and then you will apologize to Leo in front of the media. Daniel could barely believe what he was hearing. Sarah, there's no way I am apologizing to Leo Miller. I'm the victim here. Before he could finish, Sarah held her phone up for him to see, her eyes glacial. I'm sure you don't want to see Anderson Corp, the company your parents spent their entire lives building, completely wiped out, do you? Daniel's pupils widened as if he'd been struck by lightning. On the screen was the stock price for Anderson Corp, which had plummeted to an all-time low. She was actually using his family's company to threaten him. Sarah, his voice was a raw, trembling whisper, as if torn from his throat. Do you love him that much? His face was a mask of pained disbelief. Do you remember what you swore in front of the pastor? To love me for a lifetime, to trust me and stand by my side no matter what. You made a vow. Daniel's lips trembled, his eyes swimming with pain and despair. But Sarah remained completely unmoved. The woman who once could feel his every mood without a word now looked not just indifferent, but impatient. All right, a single frown from you used to break my heart. Now it just irritates me. Just do as I say, and I'll let you keep some of your dignity. Daniel stood frozen, as if turned to stone, stunned into silence for a long moment. When he finally seemed to recover, a faint, bitter smile touched his lips. Yes, of course. I should have known. He looked at Sarah, his face expressionless. Fina, I'll apologize. On one condition. You signed this share transfer agreement. Without even glancing at the document, Sarah picked up a pen and signed her name at the bottom. Daniel took back the document, a divorce agreement disguised as a share transfer, and felt a profound numbness spread through him. Under Sarah's intense gaze, he walked outside into a swarm of reporters. Facing the cameras, Daniel spoke, each word a heavy weight. I apologize for this public disturbance. My parents' death was an accident. It had nothing to do with Mr. Miller. That afternoon, news of Daniel's apology was the headline on every news outlet in New York. On social media, Sarah paid a slew of well-known environmental influencers to speak out in support of Leo. They led an army of followers, ignorant of the facts, In a crusade against the highly polluting Anderson Corporation, Daniel's social media accounts were flooded with vitriolic attacks from radical activists. He calmly deleted all his profiles, then took the signed divorce agreement to his lawyer. "Mr. Anderson," the lawyer said, "after the 1-month mandatory cooling-off period, your marriage will be officially dissolved." Daniel nodded, feeling an unexpected sense of release. In the divorce agreement, he had asked for only one thing: control of Anderson Corporation. He wanted nothing else from her. The thought of keeping anything that belonged to Sarah now made him sick. Back at the estate, he locked himself in his room, waiting for the cooling-off period to pass. Leo had effectively become the new master of the house. He demanded that the household ban all metal silverware, that everyone stop driving gas-powered cars, and that no one eat meat. Sarah hung on his every word, doting on him in a way that was sickening to watch. Daniel observed them like a detached spectator, the part of his heart that had once loved Sarah so deeply growing cold and dead with each new disappointment. All he wanted now was to get away from this place that he had come to loathe. Soon, it was the day of his parents' memorial service. Daniel rose early and went to the funeral home. It was a small service, with only a few close friends and family members invited. He placed the emerald necklace and the watch before his parents' photographs, and had asked a local priest to come and say a prayer. The hall was filled with dozens of floral wreaths. Guests with somber faces came and went, placing bouquets in the center of the hall and lighting candles in memory of the deceased. Daniel was listening to the priest's recitation when a commotion erupted outside. He tried to ignore it, but the noise grew louder and more insistent. He stood, intending to see what was happening, and looked up just in time to see Leo Miller storming into the hall. Daniel's face hardened. "Leo, what are you doing here?" he demanded. Leo ignored him, his eyes sweeping across the memorial hall. The anger in his gaze grew more intense with every passing second. "Mr. Anderson, death is a natural process. Why do you insist on such a wasteful, extravagant funeral?" he said, his voice sharp with accusation. He pointed to the wreaths and the candles. "Do you have any idea how many trees were cut down for these flowers? Do you realize how many pollutants are released into the air from these paraffin candles? Mr. Anderson, I would have thought your parents' deaths would have taught you the importance of protecting the environment. But instead of learning, you've chosen to be even more wasteful. You've gone too far." With that, Leo lunged at one of the floral wreaths, pulling a hammer from his coat and smashing it to pieces. Still not satisfied, he kicked over a large candle stand, sending sparks flying. Daniel was shaking with rage. As Leo moved to snap the memorial candles in half, he surged forward to stop him. "You're insane. Stop it." Daniel grabbed Leo by the collar and yanked him back. As Leo stumbled backward, his hands flailed wildly, trying to grab onto something for balance. Then, he let out a piercing scream. "Now!" Sarah, who had just arrived in a black dress, saw Leo cry out and fall to the ground. She rushed forward to catch him, her brow knit in a deep frown. "What happened?" Leo clutched her arm, his face a mask of pain. "Sarah, I was just trying to get Mr. Anderson to stop all this pollution, and he burned me with the candles." He held out his arm, revealing several angry, red burns on his skin. Daniel's face went pale. "I didn't. He was destroying my parents' memorial service. I was just trying to stop him." Sarah acted as if she hadn't heard a word. Her eyes were fixed on Leo's arm, a flicker of pain in her expression. She immediately ordered someone to bring a first aid kit, completely ignoring Daniel. She gently blew the wax from Leo's arm, carefully cleaning each wound and comforting him softly. "Don't worry, Leo. I'll make this right." Daniel's heart sank. He refused to believe Sarah couldn't see the wreckage of the hall and understand who was truly responsible. Sarah turned to Daniel, her voice cold and deliberate. "Guards, hold him." 2 bodyguards immediately seized Daniel, holding him fast. She then whispered an order to her assistant, whose face became a mixture of shock, reluctance, and horror. A terrible sense of dread washed over Daniel. "Sarah, what are you going to do?" Her expression was placid, her voice chillingly calm as she delivered her cruel verdict. "You dare to burn Leo? Now you will face the consequences." He let out a cold, angry laugh. "Sarah, you make me sick." His words brought a harsh look to Sarah's face. She was about to retort when the assistant hurried back in. "Ma'am, it's ready." At her words, several guards carried in a large metal basin. It was filled to the brim with glowing hot coals from the incinerator. With a nod from Sarah, The guards lifted the basin and dumped its contents all over Daniel. A strangled gasp of pure agony was torn from his throat. Daniel clenched his jaw, but a muffled groan of pain still escaped his lips. His clothes and skin were covered in the scorching embers. The searing heat clung to every inch of his skin, a fire that seemed to burn its way straight to his heart. He staggered and collapsed. The searing pain was an invisible net, trapping him in pure agony. He could feel his skin blistering, turning red and then black, and the pain was so intense he could barely draw a breath. It felt as if a fire was raging inside him, turning his organs to ash. He writhed on the floor, helpless against the waves of pain. He gasped for air, and the hot cinders filled his mouth and throat, choking him. He coughed violently, his hands flailing as he struggled to breathe. His voice was a choked, rasping whisper. "Help me. Please help." His vacant eyes found Sarah, but her attention was focused solely on Leo. "Leo, come on. I'm taking you to the hospital." As she helped him up to leave, he gently tugged on her sleeve. He looked at her with clear, concerned eyes. "But Sarah, this funeral. I'm worried about the environmental impact." Sarah immediately understood his unspoken meaning. She gave an order without a second thought. "Guards, get Daniel out of here." And this whole setup cleared out. Dismantle everything. A satisfied smile touched Leo's lips. He wrapped his arms around her neck, resting his chin on her head. "Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for always supporting me." Sarah smiled at him. "Leo, I told you I would help you make your dream a reality." With that, she turned and walked away without a single backward glance. She didn't hear Daniel's silent, agonized screams behind her. His throat was clogged with cinders. He couldn't make a sound. His face was a mask of grief, and a final, overwhelming wave of despair washed over him, swallowing the last of his consciousness. "Sarah, I regret everything. Loving you was the worst mistake of my life." Daniel was woken by the sound of arguing, but his eyelids were too heavy to open. He struggled, but couldn't force them apart. "Ms. Foster, the patient has severe, extensive burns. He needs to remain in a hypothermic therapy room. Forcibly removing him against medical advice is extremely dangerous. If his condition worsens, we cannot be held responsible." Through a fog of pain, Daniel tried to place the voice. Then, he heard a familiar man speak. "Doctor, do you have any idea how many greenhouse gases are emitted to maintain that kind of low-temperature environment? Do you know how much that will cause the sea level to rise? Do you know how many island nations that threatens? How many people will be displaced?" It was Leo, speaking with self-righteous conviction. Sarah's cool voice followed. "Don't worry, doctor. I'm Daniel's wife. If anything happens to him, I will take full responsibility." Daniel's breathing hitched. He fought to open his eyes, to scream at her, to tell her to get out. But a crushing wave of exhaustion washed over him, and he sank back into the darkness. The next time Daniel woke, the sterile smell of antiseptic filled his senses. He slowly opened his eyes and was shocked to see Sarah sitting by his bed, wringing out a cool cloth. Her eyes were shadowed with fatigue. As she laid the cool cloth on his arm, their eyes met. A flicker of relief crossed her face. "Daniel, you're awake. How are you feeling?" Daniel pulled his arm away, letting the cloth fall to the floor. His voice was a raw rasp. "How am I feeling? Why don't I dump a basin of hot coals on you? Then you can feel it for yourself. I'm sure it would be a memorable experience." Sarah's lips tightened, a flash of annoyance in her eyes, but she took a deep breath. "You were punished for your wrongdoing. I can understand why you're angry with me." But Leo had a point. Holding such a wasteful and extravagant funeral for your parents was truly inappropriate. After all, you're the husband of the CEO of Foster Industries. You need to set an example and contribute to the environmental cause. The CEO's husband? Daniel turned his head to stare out the window, his gaze lost in the distance. He was done. Someone else could have the title. He was going to leave her for good. Daniel spent more than 2 weeks in the hospital recovering from burns. Sarah visited often, but all she ever talked about was Leo. How he'd successfully shut down a coal power plant, or how well his latest environmental speech had gone, or how he'd heroically rescued a truck full of endangered animals. She sat there in the hospital room with Daniel, but her heart was clearly somewhere else, with Leo. Daniel watched her with cold eyes, his voice laced with disgust. "If you're here to brag, you've come to the wrong person. I have no interest in hearing about his heroic deeds, and frankly, I don't want to see you at all." Sarah seemed accustomed to his cold remarks. She looked up at him, her expression calm. I'm simply stating facts. You're being too sensitive. Besides, you're my husband. It's my duty to take care of you while you're in the hospital. Daniel shot her a look, a sarcastic smile playing on his lips. She didn't really care about taking care of him. The media had been buzzing about the ambiguous nature of her relationship with Leo, and it was starting to negatively impact his environmental crusade. A growing number of activists were starting to believe Leo was just using environmentalism as a pretext to marry into wealth and elevate his status. The backlash had forced him to publicly distance himself from Sarah, and she, it was clear, was absolutely desperate to win him back. And Daniel himself was just a pawn in their game, a convenient shield. After his discharge, Sarah drove him back to the Foster estate and immediately issued a dozen press releases about their unshakable bond, hoping to minimize the damage to Leo's career. When they arrived back at the estate, Daniel barely recognized the place. In a few weeks he'd been gone, Leo had completely transformed it. All the electronics had been put in storage, the traditional silverware was gone, and the backyard had been converted into a makeshift animal sanctuary. Leo greeted them at the door with a beaming smile, playing the part of the man of the house. "Sarah, Mr. Anderson, welcome home." Daniel just gave a short, humorless laugh and said nothing. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the chef slowly carrying a basket of firewood. Leo noticed his gaze and explained with a smile, "Reducing electricity usage is crucial for the environment, so I've had the kitchen staff switch to cooking over a wood fire." Sarah's expression didn't change. She clearly already knew. Daniel raised an eyebrow, the corner of his mouth twitching. "Mr. Miller, and burning wood doesn't create carbon dioxide?" Leo's face stiffened for a second before he recovered his composure. "Mr. Anderson, you may not realize, but the pollution generated by the power grid is far worse than that from simple wood fire. I'm merely choosing the lesser of two evils." Daniel didn't argue. He would be gone soon enough. Leo could turn the whole estate upside down for all he cared. At dinner, the table was laden with vegetarian dishes. After weeks of hospital food, even simple vegetables tasted incredible to Daniel. Across the table, Leo and Sarah were whispering to each other. It turned out Leo had been invited to speak at an environmental forum in California. He was refusing to travel by plane or any other vehicle that used fossil fuels, insisting instead on taking a sailboat. Sarah was arguing against it. A sailboat was eco-friendly, certainly, but it was neither fast nor safe. He finally relented, agreeing to fly first class with her to the West Coast. "But Sarah," he said, "I'm worried about that black bear I rescued. The one that was forced to perform in a circus. If we're both gone, who will look after it?" Sarah answered without looking up. "Why don't we just send it to a proper sanctuary?" "Absolutely not." Leo immediately shot back. "It's aggressive and has a tendency to attack. I'm worried it might hurt the other animals." His eyes then fell on Daniel, a flicker of resentment in their depths. "Perhaps Mr. Anderson could look after it. After all, while I've done a great deal for the Foster family's environmental efforts, I'm not an official part of this household. Mr. Anderson is the master of the estate. Having him help out would be a great first step on his own environmental journey." Daniel froze mid-bite. He slowly swallowed his food, then asked deliberately, "Is Mr. Miller asking for a more official title?" He glanced at Sarah with a small, mocking smile. "Don't break your darling's heart, Miss Foster. I have no interest in environmentalism. Since Mr. Miller is so passionate, perhaps you should just make him the master of the estate." Sarah slammed her silverware down on the table, her eyes flashing with anger. "Daniel, have you had enough?" Daniel met her gaze without flinching. "I have no interest in being a part of your little romance. I won't be feeding any animals, and I'll be leaving this house very soon." Before he could finish, Leo cut in hurriedly. "Sarah, it's all right. Please don't let me cause a fight between you two. If it's too much trouble, I just won't go." He looked down, his expression like a kicked puppy's. Sarah, completely focused on Leo, hadn't even registered Daniel's last sentence. She cupped Leo's face in her hands, her gaze soft. "Leo, don't let a small thing like this derail your future." Then, her expression hardened, and she barked an order to the staff. "Take Daniel to the bear's enclosure." Now, several servants immediately moved to restrain Daniel, who was struggling wildly. "Sarah, you're out of your mind. Let go of me." But no matter how much he yelled, he was dragged out and thrown into the black bear's enclosure. The bear's eyes were red, and saliva dripped from its sharp teeth. It radiated an aura of pure, manic aggression. Because of Leo's mandated vegetarianism for the entire estate, The bear hadn't had meat in a very long time. It sniffed the air, and as the scent of Daniel's flesh and blood hit its nostrils, its pupils dilated with predatory hunger. A low growl rumbled deep in its chest as it locked its eyes on him, creeping closer, its paws silent on the ground. Daniel's breathing hitched, and a primal fear seized him, rooting him to the spot. His eyes were wide with terror, but he fought the urge to scream, desperately trying to remain calm. The staff all kept their distance, terrified of the hungry animal. As the bear crept closer, Daniel focused on slowing his breathing, making himself seem as small and non-threatening as possible. Then, his gaze fell on one of the servants, his voice sharp and cold. "Go get a jar of honey. Now." The servant hesitated, but Daniel's eyes were deadly serious. "Even if Sarah doesn't care for me anymore, I'm still her husband. If I die in here, believe me, she will make sure every single one of you follows me to the grave." The staff exchanged nervous glances, then one of them ran to fetch the honey. Daniel took the jar and carefully poured the honey on the ground at the far end of the enclosure. A bear's eyesight is poor, but its sense of smell is incredibly keen. The sweet scent immediately drew its attention. Seeing his chance, Daniel began to back away slowly, step by careful step, toward the gate. 10 feet, then 5. One more step. He gritted his teeth and bolted for the opening. But his sudden movement seemed to enrage the bear. With a roar, it swiped at him with its massive paw. The blow connected with a sickening thud, sending Daniel flying like a broken doll. He hit the ground hard and didn't move. His world went black. He woke up in a hospital bed. He was wrapped in so many bandages he felt like a mummy. He was alone in the room, with no one there to look after him. Sarah was with Leo in California for the Environmental Forum. They would be gone for a week. Daniel spent 3 days recovering in the hospital before he got the text from the city. The cooling-off period was over. He could now finalize the divorce. Against his doctor's orders, he checked himself out, went straight to the county clerk's office, and picked up the dissolution of marriage certificate. Then he returned to the Foster estate, packed a suitcase with the few belongings that were his, and walked out without a moment's hesitation. He called a car and went directly to the headquarters of Sterling Enterprises. On the way, a news alert popped up on his phone. It was a clip of Leo's latest speech at the forum. "People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you?" Below the stage, politicians and business leaders applauded wildly. Sarah gazed up at him, her eyes filled with adoration and love. Daniel gave a cold, thin smile and closed the news app. "Fine, Sara. If you're so determined to help Leo achieve his dream, then I'll be sure to help you along." Daniel walked up to the reception desk at Sterling Enterprises. "I'm here to see Jessica Sterling." The receptionist led him to the CEO's office and gestured for him to enter. He took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Meanwhile, after the forum, Sarah and Leo were sightseeing around California. Her trip was cut short when she saw a news alert. Sterling Enterprises and Anderson Corp announced major strategic partnership with joint ventures in combustion engines, nuclear power, and other sectors. Sarah's face went pale. She immediately opened iMessage to call Daniel, but the call wouldn't go through. A small red notification reminded her that he had blocked her number. The seed of unease began to sprout in her heart. Just then, she got a text. It was from her best friend, with a screenshot of Daniel's latest Facebook post, demanding to know what had happened and why they were getting a divorce. Divorce? With trembling hands, Sarah tapped on the image. It was a new post from Daniel. There were 2 photos. The first was of their divorce certificate. The second was of him shaking hands with Jessica Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Enterprises. The caption read, "Some endings are blessing. We're better off apart. From this day forward, we are done." In the CEO's office at Sterling Enterprises, the large executive chair slowly swiveled to face Daniel as he entered. Jessica Sterling sat with her arms crossed, a faint smile on her lips, her light brown eyes watching him intently. The smile didn't reach her eyes. "Ms. Sterling," Daniel said, approaching her desk. "Mr. Anderson," she replied, her own smile unwavering as she stood to shake his hand. "Please sit." Daniel got straight to the point. "I was wondering if you have any interest in Foster Industries." Jessica's eyes glinted, her smile widening slightly. She didn't answer directly, instead changing the subject. "Mr. Anderson, I was under the impression you and Sarah Foster were very close. A small smile played on Daniel's lips as he pulled a folder from his briefcase and handed it to her. Jessica took it, and, as she scanned the contents, her pupils constricted for a fraction of a second before her expression returned to neutral. The file contained detailed information on Foster Industries' combustion engine plants and several of their other, more polluting subsidiaries. "Is that a sufficient show of good faith, Miss Sterling?" Daniel asked, taking a sip of the tea on the table before him. Jessica let out a soft, amused laugh. "Mr. Anderson, please. Your proposal has my full attention. What is it you need from me?" Daniel set down his cup, his eyes burning with a cold, deep-seated hatred. "I want to utterly destroy Sarah Foster and Leo Miller." Jessica closed the folder, a spark of keen interest in her eyes. "I need your help," Daniel said, looking her directly in the eye. "I've heard the stories about how the Sterling family built its empire. When it comes to gathering intelligence, no one can match you. The Sterlings and the Fosters were the two titans of New York's elite, locked in a bitter rivalry for decades with neither side gaining a clear advantage. But after Sarah's marriage to Daniel, linking the Fosters with the Andersons, the balance had tipped slightly in the Fosters' favor. But the Sterlings had interests in both legitimate and illicit enterprises. They were the uncrowned rulers of the city's underworld. Because of this, the Fosters had never been able to completely push them out. Jessica lowered her gaze in thought for a moment, then looked up, her eyes sharp. "What's your plan?" Daniel saw the flicker of interest in her eyes and knew he had her. "It's simple. We start with Leo Miller. We expose him for the fraud he is. Sarah has tied her reputation completely to his. She's made a lot of enemies for his sake, forced a lot of smaller companies into bankruptcy. And besides, my parents aren't the only lives on his conscience. Sarah is careful. I haven't been able to get any hard evidence against her. But for you, Miss Sterling, I imagine it would be a simple matter." Jessica leaned back in her chair, a sly smile on her face. "Mr. Anderson, getting evidence on Leo Miller won't be a problem. The question is, what's in it for me if I help you?" She held up the folder. "This is a good start, but it's not enough." Daniel knew this was the critical moment. He had to give her an offer she couldn't refuse. Anderson Corp will become the most loyal partner Sterling Enterprises has ever had. Jessica stared at him, then typed something on her computer and turned the monitor so he could see. "Are you joking, Mr. Anderson? Anderson Corp is on the verge of bankruptcy. It can hardly take care of itself." At her words, Daniel reached into his briefcase and pulled out another folder. "Anderson Corp's expertise isn't just in nuclear power. We've been developing proprietary technology in clean energy, photovoltaics, and electric vehicles for years. As long as you agree to this partnership, Anderson Corp is willing to share all of it with Sterling Enterprises. We'll take a 30% cut." Jessica studied the file for a long time, then a slow, satisfied smile spread across her face. "Mr. Anderson, it's a pleasure to be in business with you." Daniel let out a quiet breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "The pleasure is all mine," he said with a smile. The news of the partnership between Sterling and Anderson sent shockwaves through New York City. Anderson Corp's stock price miraculously began to climb from rock bottom. It didn't reach its former heights, but the free fall had finally been stopped. The following day, Sterling and Anderson held a joint press conference. Every major news outlet in the city was there, and the event was live-streamed across all social media platforms. Daniel sat at the podium, a row of microphones in front of him. He took a deep breath, then dropped a bombshell. "Good morning, everyone. My name is Daniel Anderson. I am the current chairman of Anderson Corporation. I'm also Sarah Foster's ex-husband." A wave of murmurs and camera flashes swept through the room. Daniel held up his divorce certificate. "The reason for my divorce from Sarah Foster," he said calmly, "is a young environmental activist named Leo Miller." The reporter's eyes lit up, and the room exploded with the sound of camera shutters. "A month ago, Sarah Foster unilaterally canceled the joint nuclear power project with Anderson Corp, causing our company's capital chain to break. She gave the position of general manager of Foster Industries, a position that was supposed to be mine, to Leo Miller. When I went to demand that they honor our contract, he refused, claiming nuclear power was not green, and then led a protest that involved setting fire to the facility, a fire that resulted in the deaths of my parents." Daniel fought to keep his voice steady, to suppress the rage that was boiling inside him. His so-called environmentalism was to start a fire that caused an explosion, directly murdering my parents. He glanced at Jessica, who was seated beside him. She gave a slight, nod to one of her aides. A moment later, a video began to play on the large screen behind the podium. It clearly showed Leo looking around to make sure no one was watching before he started the fire. A collective gasp went through the crowd of reporters. And then, Daniel continued, his voice thick with emotion. He desecrated their bodies, having them ground into dust and thrown into the ocean to hide what he had done. The reporters typed furiously, their heads bent over their laptops, trying to capture every word. The live stream went viral, and within minutes, the story was the #1 trending topic on every social media platform. Fighting back his tears, Daniel stood and rolled up his sleeves and pant legs, revealing the angry red scars that still covered his skin. Leo Miller crashed my parents' memorial service. When I tried to stop him, he accused me of burning him. Sarah, without even asking what happened, took his side and had her guards pour hot coals over me. Then, she had me moved out of intensive care against my doctor's orders. For the sake of his hypocritical environmentalism, Leo Miller forced me into an enclosure with a starving black bear, an attack that nearly killed me. He projected his medical records onto the screen. The reporters stared, their faces a mixture of shock and disbelief. After the press conference, hashtags like hashtag Sarah Foster exposed, hashtag EcoWarrior hypocrisy, and hashtag Leo Miller is a murderer exploded on Twitter. The internet erupted in a firestorm of outrage directed at the pair. Eco-warrior? Someone tell him to take off that fur-trimmed jacket before he preaches to us again, read one tweet. Is Sarah Foster insane? Another user posted. She tortures her own husband, but fawns all over some slogan shouting hypocrite. She must be blind. What a fraud. All that talk about saving the planet was just a cover for his schemes. How dare he? Meanwhile, Foster Industries' stock price went into a nosedive. One after another, their corporate partners began to pull their contracts and reach out to Andersen Corporation. As proposals from new potential partners flooded his inbox, Daniel knew his plan had worked. He turned to Jessica and gave a deep, respectful bow. Miss Sterling, thank you. None of this would have been possible without your help finding that evidence. Jessica laughed softly, gently helping him straighten up. Mr. Andersen, while I appreciate the sentiment, I've always been more interested in tangible results. They looked at each other and smiled. Ignoring Leo's complaints, Sarah booked the first flight back to New York. The moment she stepped off the plane, she was mobbed by a horde of reporters. The sight of Sarah Foster and Leo Miller together sent the paparazzi into a frenzy. They surged forward, surrounding the couple, cameras flashing relentlessly. Ms. Foster, did you divorce Mr. Andersen because of Leo Miller? Mr. Miller, you claim to be dedicated to the environmental cause, but now you're jet-setting with a billionaire CEO. Have you been lying to the public? Ms. Foster, do you have any comment on the allegations that you abused your husband? Mr. Miller, did you murder Mr. Andersen's parents so you could take his place? The questions came one after another. Sarah's face was a thunderous mask the entire time. Leo huddled behind the bodyguards, a look of simmering resentment in his eyes. It wasn't until they were safely inside the Bentley that Sarah tore the scarf from her neck and threw it furiously to the floor. Where is Daniel? She snarled. The driver glanced at her furious expression in the rearview mirror. Ms. Foster, he said carefully, Mr. Andersen has moved out. With a loud bang, she slammed her hand down on the armrest. The car soon arrived at Foster Industries, where the heads of PR and marketing were waiting anxiously for her to take control of the disaster. Issue a statement immediately, she commanded. Highlight all the contributions our company has made to environmental causes. Contact our network of activists and have them speak out in our favor. As for Daniel, we'll say he's a disgruntled ex-husband, spreading lies out of spite after a bitter financial dispute. Sarah had assumed that, just like in Europe, countless environmental activists would rally to her and Leo's defense. She was wrong. The public wasn't interested in her carefully crafted statements. They were looking at her actions. Foster Industries is a joke, one comment read. They're probably just shills for some foreign NGO. All talk, no action. If you really care, go plant some trees in a desert. Shutting down factories and putting people out of work doesn't make you a hero. You can't have environmental protection without a stable economy. It's just empty words, another said. And they have the nerve to use saving the planet as an excuse for their personal drama. It's an insult to people who actually care about the environment. The narrative had spun completely out of her control. Foster Industries' stock continued to plummet as dozens of partners terminated their contracts and demanded compensation. Sarah raged in her office until she finally collapsed onto her sofa in exhaustion. At that moment, her phone buzzed. The name on the screen was Daniel's. Sarah answered without a second thought. "Daniel, what the hell do you think you're doing?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by a soft chuckle. Well, it seems Ms. Foster hasn't quite grasped the situation." His scornful tone was like a shard of ice piercing her heart. "What about that divorce certificate?" "I never signed any divorce papers," she demanded, her voice tight with a tension she hadn't even realized was there. Daniel's voice was calm and detached. "Ms. Foster, if you doubt the validity of the certificate, feel free to check with the county clerk. But that's not why I'm calling. I'm calling to inform you that I have filed a lawsuit for your breach of contract with Anderson Corporation. You can either pay the $500 million penalty, or you can wait for the court to enforce the judgment." His words left Sarah speechless for a moment. "But Foster Industries acquired Anderson Corporation. How can you—" she started, but the line went dead. He had hung up. She tried to call back, but he had already blocked her number. Her eyes burning, she summoned her assistant and demanded to know what was going on. After the assistant explained everything, Sarah stumbled back, catching herself on the edge of her desk. So, the document she had signed, the one she thought was a share transfer, had actually been the divorce papers. The agreement had clearly stipulated the division of their assets. That was how he had regained control of Anderson Corp. She sank into her chair, feeling as if all the strength had been drained from her body. Daniel, when had he become so ruthless? Sarah sat there, stunned, her eyes fixed on a framed photo of the two of them on her desk. They were 8 years apart. For most of her life, Sarah had seen Daniel as a little brother. She had watched over him, protected him, and she wasn't sure when, exactly, that feeling had started to change into something else. She watched him grow, day by day, into a handsome, charismatic young man. It wasn't until she felt a sharp, possessive pang of jealousy that she finally understood. Unconsciously, over the years, she had fallen in love with him. Their relationship had progressed naturally from there, and both their families had been delighted. Sarah had waited 7 years, and finally, she had married the boy she had watched grow into a man. Married life was much the same as it had been when they were dating. She doted on him, wanting to give him everything the world had to offer. But perhaps they had been together for too long. Soon, Sarah started to feel restless. The thrill of the chase was gone, and the reality felt less exciting. She had almost forgotten how she had managed to wait for those 7 long years. Then, at a conference, she saw Leo Miller give a speech. The fire in his eyes, the passion in his voice, it immediately captivated her. It was like a stone dropped into the calm lake of her life, sending out thrilling, dangerous ripples. She began to pursue him relentlessly. He had such a unique purpose, dedicating his life to a cause. Sarah found him completely fascinating and couldn't tear her eyes away. When Daniel had heard the rumors and confronted her, she had dismissed his concerns. After all, they had known each other their whole lives, and he was hopelessly in love with her. She would always keep him by her side, of course, and provide him with the best of everything. Just then, the office door opened, pulling Sarah from a reverie. Leo walked over to her, a hurt expression on his face, and gently put his arms around her. "Sarah, don't worry. Mr. Anderson is clearly just taking his anger toward me out on you. That's why he did this. I'll go talk to him. I'll tell him it's all my fault." His voice was hoarse. "Mr. Anderson misunderstands me so deeply," he said slowly. "He insists that I murdered his parents, that I destroyed their remains. But I did no such thing. If I had known this would happen, I would have taken him with me to the protest. Then maybe the accident could have been avoided." His words immediately dispelled any doubts Sarah might have had. She hugged him tightly, resting her head wearily against his chest. "I know it's not your fault. You meant well. Daniel is just being stubborn and irrational. You don't need to talk to him. I'll handle it." With her head buried in his chest, she didn't see the flash of malice in Leo's eyes. As soon as he left her office, Leo called for a car. He didn't notice the other car that began to tail him silently. The car wound its way through a series of back streets before stopping at a secluded house. Leo got out and knocked on the door, which was opened by a woman. From their car down the street, Jessica and Daniel watched silently. A few minutes later, Leo emerged from the house alone, a satisfied smirk on his face. Jessica made a call. "Move in now," she said quietly. Instantly, a team of plainclothes security guards surrounded the house. They knocked, and as soon as the door opened a crack, they forced their way inside. Moments later, they emerged dragging a thin, frail-looking woman with them. A small smile played on Jessica's lips as she started the car and pulled away. In the car, Daniel looked at her, his expression serious. "Miss Sterling, thank you." He had been hesitant when Jessica first suggested the press conference. Leo was too careful. Daniel hadn't been able to find the evidence he knew must exist. He'd worried it had been destroyed. But then Jessica had told him her plan. "We'll lure the snake out of its hole." And just as she predicted, the news of Daniel's lawsuit had spooked Leo, sending him running straight to where he'd hidden his proof. Jessica drove them to one of her private residences. It had a basement, a dark, grim-looking space. The guards pushed the thin woman forward, and she stumbled and fell at their feet. Daniel's eyes fell on the t-shirt the woman was wearing, which was emblazoned with Leo's face. "What's your relationship with Leo Miller?" he asked slowly. The woman looked up, her eyes wide with fear. "Who are you?" "This is kidnapping. It's illegal." Jessica let out a soft laugh. "Give me a moment," she said to Daniel. A few minutes later, the woman had told them everything she knew, her eyes filled with a new, profound terror whenever she looked at Jessica. She had no visible injuries, apart from a small trickle of blood at the corner of her mouth. Jessica unlocked the woman's phone and held it up for Daniel to see. "She says all the videos are on here." Daniel nodded, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes, but he didn't ask what had happened in the basement. They left the basement and went up to the living room. It was a minimalist space, all blacks, whites, and grays, with a cold, sterile feel. Jessica invited Daniel to sit, then went to make tea. "Here, some along." He inhaled the rich, earthy aroma. It was clearly a very expensive tea. Jessica sat across from him, pouring a cup. "I thought you might be afraid of me," she said. Daniel paused. "Why would you say that? The rumors always painted you as Sarah Foster's innocent first love. So pure and sheltered. I thought a scene like that might scare you," she said nonchalantly. "That kind of scene." Daniel remembered what he had seen in the basement, Jessica restraining the woman and striking her again and again. He gave a small, humorless smile. "Her first love? So that's how Sarah saw me. As for you, I wouldn't say I'm afraid. Just a little surprised." Jessica set down the teapot and poured a cup for herself. "Oh, surprised?" He considered for a moment. "I suppose I thought you would have your men handle it. Since you're a woman." She couldn't help but smile at that. Never underestimate a woman. Daniel drained his own cup. "I don't. On the contrary, I have a great deal of admiration for impressive women like yourself, Miss Sterling." Jessica refilled his cup. "Losing you proves Sarah Foster is a fool." He was silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke, his voice hoarse. "No, I was the fool for ever loving her." As they drank their tea, Daniel and Jessica went through the contents of the woman's phone. She was one of Leo's most fanatical followers, and he had her handle many of his more sensitive tasks. In an encrypted folder, they found a video of Leo destroying Daniel's parents' bodies. "This is it," Daniel said, a wave of relief washing over him. "This is the proof we need to finally bring him to justice." Jessica didn't reply. Her attention focused on a set of photos she was scrolling through. "What is it?" he asked. "Is there something wrong with those pictures?" They looked like ordinary photos of Leo at his speeches and protests. Jessica selected one and pointed to the file information displayed beneath it. "Something's not right. A normal photo file is a few megabytes at most. These are over a gigabyte each." "You mean they're encrypted?" Daniel realized immediately. Jessica nodded. "It's a form of steganography. You can hide other files inside an image file, encrypting them in plain sight." He frowned. "Can you decrypt them?" "With the right software, we should be able to extract the hidden files." She immediately sent the photos to her company's tech department with instructions to decrypt them. Half an hour later, the decrypted files landed in Jessica's inbox. They opened the first one eagerly. It was a video secretly filmed of Leo. It turned out the woman wasn't just a loyal follower. She was an obsessive stalker. She had followed him everywhere, secretly recording his every move with a hidden camera. "What is this?" Daniel's pupils constricted. The video showed the woman tailing Leo as he deliberately sought out the area of the industrial park where flammable materials were stored. Then, he made a phone call, luring Daniel's parents to the location. Then, he tossed a lit flare into the building, triggering the massive explosion that had killed them, leaving not even a body behind. Daniel's eyes burned with tears, his voice a choked whisper. "It was him, Leo Miller. He murdered my parents." Jessica watched him struggling to maintain his composure. and she felt a pang of sympathy, her own hands clenching into fists. Before, all we had was the security footage of him starting the fire. It might not have been enough to convict him, but with this, there's no doubt. It's premeditated murder. I'll have my people compile all this footage and send it directly to the NYPD, she continued. And I'll retain Mark Thompson for you. He's the best criminal prosecutor in the city. Daniel's eyes were red, his lips pressed into a thin, tight line. The rapid rise and fall of his chest betrayed the storm of emotion raging within him. After a moment's hesitation, Jessica reached out and gently patted his back in a comforting gesture. Don't worry, she said softly. I'll handle Sarah. I promise you, Leo Miller will get exactly what he deserves. The next day, news that Leo Miller had been arrested again by the NYPD sent the city into a frenzy. Every news outlet in the city descended on the police precinct, hungry for a story. When her assistant reported the news, Sarah flew into a rage, slamming her fist on her desk. What happened? Didn't the department give us any warning? Her assistant flinched. Ma'am, she said timidly, they say the police have concrete proof that Mr. Miller committed murder. Sarah whipped her head around, stunned. What did you say? Sarah rushed to the precinct, pushing her way through the mob of reporters with the help of her security team. The moment she stepped into the lobby, she saw Daniel and Jessica sitting calmly off to one side. They were sitting close together, whispering to each other, and the sight of it filled Sarah with an unfamiliar irritation. She started to walk toward them, but was stopped by a choked, desperate voice. Sarah, it was Leo. He was in handcuffs, his face a mask of desperation. You have to help me. The police are framing me for murder. Sarah stopped and turned toward him. Officer, what crime is Mr. Miller being accused of? She asked. The officer gave her a brief, dismissive glance. The case is under active investigation, ma'am. We can't disclose any details at this time. After his initial questioning, his lawyer will be briefed. With that, two officers began to lead Leo toward a back room. Sarah, help me, he cried, his eyes wide with panic, pleading with her to do something. The sheer terror in his eyes made her heart soften. Stop, she commanded, pulling out her phone and quickly dialing a number. She held the phone out to the officers. This is the deputy commissioner. He'll tell you what to do. The two officers glanced at the screen, then back at her. One of them let out a small, amused huff. Miss Foster, what exactly are we supposed to be looking at? A knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. She looked at her phone and saw the call hadn't gone through. The number you have dialed is not in service, a robotic voice announced. In disbelief, Sarah hung up, checked the number again, and redialed. After more than a dozen attempts, she got the same result. A chill ran down her spine. One of the officers was looking at her, his expression serious. Miss Foster, this is the NYPD, not a private security firm. We conduct our investigations by the book. All our arrests are done with due process. We don't frame innocent people, and we don't mistreat suspects. You can be assured of that. With that, they turned to lead Leo away again. He began to struggle like a wild animal. Sarah, you have to do something. I can't go to prison. Don't let them lock me up. Sarah stood frozen, her mind racing, trying to think of who else she could call. Then, one of the officers paused and turned back to her. Oh, and by the way, Miss Foster, Deputy Commissioner Williams was suspended this morning, pending an investigation into abuse of power. I doubt you'll be able to reach him. The phone slipped from Sarah's hand and clattered to the floor. Her eyes were wide with shock and suspicion. What was happening? Then her gaze fell on Jessica Sterling, and a sudden, terrible understanding dawned. She strode over to them. This was you, she said. It was a question, but it sounded like an accusation. Jessica, who had been watching with a faint, mocking smile, uncrossed her legs. Are you speaking to me, Miss Foster? Sarah's face darkened. Jessica Sterling, what is your game? Then, her eyes shifted to Daniel. Daniel, are you still sulking? Daniel was floored by her bizarre logic. Sarah, if you're having a psychotic break, you should see a doctor. Don't come here and embarrass yourself in public. Please. He truly could not comprehend how she could twist this into him throwing a tantrum. Did she not use her brain at all? Jessica let out a soft laugh. Miss Foster, I'm simply doing my civic duty, sending a dangerous parasite to prison where he belongs. This is New York City, after all. We can't have criminals running amok. You, Sarah began, raising her hand to strike, but Jessica caught her wrist and shoved her back. Sarah stumbled, catching her balance. Daniel shot to his feet, glaring at her. Sarah, This is a police station. If you so much as lay a finger on Ms. Sterling, I swear I will make you regret it. Sarah had never seen this side of Daniel before, threatening her for another woman. She opened her mouth to say something else, but was cut off by the frantic ringing of her phone. Ms. Foster, it's terrible. All of our West Coast partners are suddenly pulling out of their contracts. Her assistant's panicked voice cried from the other end of the line. What? Sarah's face went white. She had gone with Leo to California for 2 reasons. 1, because she was infatuated with him, and 2, because she'd planned to leverage his eco-warrior status to secure lucrative deals with American and European corporations. After all, in the West, environmentalism was often just a code word for massive government subsidies. Anything with a green label had enormous potential for exploitation. And with the endless proliferation of environmental groups in the US and Europe, getting their approval was a key step for any major enterprise. Leo was supposed to be Foster Industries' ticket in. What happened? Sarah asked, her eyes darting between Daniel and Jessica before she turned and moved to a quieter corner of the lobby. The news of Mr. Miller's arrest has gone global. It's trending everywhere. And the video, the one showing him murdering Mr. Anderson's parents, someone's leaked it online. It's been shared millions of times already. Sarah had been so preoccupied with damage control at home that she hadn't been paying attention to social media. The news that Leo had murdered Daniel's parents hit her like a physical blow, leaving her mind reeling and blank. She fumbled with her phone, opening Twitter. The top trending topics were hashtag EcoWarrior arrested and hashtag Leo Miller is a monster. 8 of the top 10 trending topics were about him. With a trembling hand, she tapped on one. A video loaded, one that had already been viewed and shared tens of millions of times. I knew he was a fraud, one comment read. Calls himself an eco-warrior, yells at everyone else for not doing enough, but he's a wasteful, criminal hypocrite. Talks about protecting animals while wearing a fur-trimmed collar, another pointed out. Goes on and on about simple living, but did you see that chair in his office? It's a $130,000 designer piece. The endless stream of mocking, angry comments made Sarah's heart sink. The video began to play. It showed, in sickening detail, how Leo had lured Daniel's parents to the warehouse, and then how he had calmly and cruelly started the fire. Sarah felt as if she'd been struck by lightning, the blood freezing in her veins. And the video wasn't over. It cut to a montage of other secret recordings the stalker had taken, moments Leo never knew were being filmed. It showed him pretending to eat a vegan meal in public, only to sneak away to a 3-star Michelin restaurant to gorge on steak. It showed him calling for a global ban on air travel, then sleeping soundly in a first-class seat on a private jet. It showed him giving a passionate speech about the evils of deforestation, while sitting in a chair made from illegally harvested rainforest timber. The hypocrisy was endless, each new clip more damning than the last. Sarah's eyes were bloodshot as she stared at the screen, her hand gripping her phone so tightly she was surprised it didn't crack. Her face was a mask of cold fury. All this time, she had believed Leo was a pure, simple soul who cared about the planet. She never imagined he was a monster. He had deceived her completely. With a cry of pure rage, Sarah threw her phone against the wall, shattering it into a dozen pieces. Watching the videos, then remembering the righteous, noble persona he had always shown her, she felt a wave of profound nausea. She wanted to kill him with her bare hands. It was over. Everything was over. A wave of dizziness washed over her, and she had to lean against the wall to stay upright. Daniel's press conference had already cost her all of her domestic partners. She had spent a fortune and pulled every string she had to secure those new overseas deals. Now, with Leo's green mask torn away, those deals were gone too. It was the single greatest failure of her career. Do whatever it takes to stabilize the situation with the overseas partners, she commanded her assistant, and cut all ties between Foster Industries and Leo Miller. I want him completely disavowed. As for our domestic partners, I will go to them myself and apologize. Her eyes turned toward the police precinct, a cold, ruthless fire burning in their depths. Leo Miller, I will make you wish you had never been born. Sarah hung up and rushed back into the precinct lobby, looking for Daniel. But he was gone. She searched the entire lobby, but he was nowhere to be found. She clenched her hands into fists, her heart filled with a sharp, bitter regret. Ignoring Leo's fate, Sarah drove back to her office. Thanks to the scandal, Foster Industries stock had hit an all-time low. The board of directors was furious with her. At the board meeting, Sarah offered a full, contrite apology for her mistakes. Her humble demeanor managed to quell the board's initial fury. Members of the board, I take full responsibility for my recent errors in judgment. I am prepared to resign if necessary. But I cannot stand by and watch the company my father built be destroyed. I will do whatever it takes to save it. This is a critical moment for Foster Industries. We all need to work together if we are to weather this storm. I will do what it takes to regain the trust of our partners. All I ask is that you give me one more chance. With that, she gave a deep, formal bow to the assembled board. The most senior member exchanged a look with his neighbor, then slowly nodded. All right, Sarah, we'll give you one more chance. With the board's backing, Sarah immediately launched into action. She went, one by one, to Foster Industries' most loyal former partners, offering sincere apologies and revised contracts with extremely favorable terms. She immediately reopened the combustion engine plant, rehiring the workers she had fired at a higher salary and with generous compensation packages. Then, she personally visited every one of the polluting factories she had forced into bankruptcy and offered them a public, sincere apology. Foster Industries was, after all, a titan of industry. It had been wounded, but it was far from dead. Between Sarah's sincere apologies and her promises of extremely favorable profit margins, many of her former partners, after careful consideration, agreed to renew their contracts. A week later, the bleeding had stopped. Foster Industries' stock began a slow recovery. Because of a new partnership, Daniel now spent a great deal of time at Sterling Enterprises. Jessica had even set aside a permanent office for him there. The two of them were in her office, looking at the latest news about Foster Industries. Daniel had to admit, Sarah was every bit the brilliant heiress she'd been raised to be. To pull the company back from a disaster like that, she had more than earned her title as CEO. Jessica rested her chin in her hand, a small smile playing on her lips. I'll give her this. Sarah Foster has guts. She knows when to fight and when to fold. Daniel turned to her. We tried to get to her partners before she did, but most of them still chose to re-sign with Foster. We didn't get as many as I'd hoped. Jessica was unconcerned, an excited gleam in her eyes. Foster Industries is an old and powerful institution. I never expected to bring it down in one go. It's enough that we've wounded it this badly. Besides, Sarah isn't a fool. Leo is a liability now. She'll be looking for a way to cut him loose. Daniel met her teasing gaze, a questioning look in his own eyes. Jessica's smile widened. And what's the best way for her to do that? She asked, her eyes fixed on him. Why? By bringing the former master of the house back into the fold, of course. Jessica's words proved prophetic. The very next day, Sarah Foster appeared in the lobby of Anderson Corp. The receptionist called up to Daniel's office to inform him he had a visitor. Daniel was reviewing a file when his assistant informed him. He looked up, his voice ice cold. I won't see her. Have security escort her out. A few minutes later, his assistant knocked again. Sir, Miss Foster is in the lobby. She says she won't leave until she's spoken with you. Daniel's brow furrowed. What about security? Have them remove her. The assistant looked uncomfortable. Sir, she has her own security detail with her. Our guards are reluctant to approach. Daniel took a few deep breaths, trying to calm the anger that was rising in him. Fine. If she wants to wait, let her. With that, he turned back to his work. Sarah waited in the lobby for the rest of the day. She sat on a sofa in the lobby, scrolling through the photos on her phone. There were pictures of the two of them from when they were children. She'd been so much taller than him then. He looked like a little doll standing next to her. In one, they were both beaming, her arms slung easily over his small shoulders. They looked so happy together. She kept scrolling through photos of them when they'd first started dating. At the aquarium, the zoo at Disneyland. In every picture, Daniel was smiling, a bright, unguarded smile, his eyes filled with a pure, uncomplicated love for her. Goofy, shy laughing. Sarah didn't even notice the small, wistful smile on her own face as she looked at them. Then came the wedding photos, which she kept saved in a private album. There she was in her white dress, her head resting on Daniel's shoulder, a look of pure, unadulterated happiness on her face. They had done several theme shoots. A modern one, a vintage 1920s one, a classic black and white one. In every single photo, Daniel was breathtakingly handsome. She swiped through photo after photo until she reached the end, and she realized with a jolt that they hadn't taken a single photo together in years. After the wedding, the pictures of the two of them together had become more and more scarce. She suddenly remembered the day Daniel had burst into her study demanding to know what was going on. That was when he had started to change, to become more withdrawn. She thought back to her obsession with Leo and how she had completely and utterly ignored Daniel. She had told him, her face a cold mask, that you couldn't settle in love, and that Leo was the love of her life. She had ignored the small, sour feeling in her own heart, the part of her that didn't want to let Daniel go. She made up a flimsy excuse to keep him. And what had Daniel done then? He had endured it all in silence, patiently waiting for her to come back to him. And how had she repaid that patience? She had let Leo destroy the Andersons' company. She had protected her parents' murderer, a man who had left them with no body to bury. She had forced an innocent victim to apologize to his abuser. She had desecrated a funeral, burned him with hot coals, and then denied him proper medical care. Her fingernails dug into her palms, her face a mask of regret. She couldn't stop thinking about how good Daniel had been to her. He had been her rock, supporting her not just in her work, but taking care of every little detail of her life. When she worked late, she would come home to find him asleep on the sofa, waiting up for her. When she had to travel for business, he would pack her suitcase for her, everything perfectly organized. And what had she ever done for him? She hadn't just failed to appreciate his kindness. She had taken it completely for granted. She had thrown it all away to chase after a worthless fraud, and in doing so, had destroyed her own marriage. She had single-handedly killed the Daniel who had looked at her with nothing but love in his eyes. A wave of regret, so powerful it was like a physical blow, washed over her. She finally truly understood. She had lost a man who loved her more than life itself. It was all her own fault. Daniel, immersed in his work, had completely forgotten about Sarah. He was pulled from his concentration by the rumbling of his stomach. He looked at the clock. It was already 11 at night. The only lights still on in the entire building were in his office and his assistant's. He pushed open the door to his assistant's office. "I'm so sorry," he said guiltily. "I got caught up and lost track of time. I'll make sure you're paid double for the overtime." His assistant just smiled. "Thank you, Mr. Anderson. I'll head out now then." Daniel nodded. He went to the break room, made himself a cup of instant ramen, and returned to his desk to eat while he continued to review the data. By the time he finished, it was past midnight. Daniel stretched, packed his things, and headed home. Just as he stepped out of the elevator in the main lobby, someone grabbed his arm and pulled him aside. He flinched, his body reacting on instinct, his elbow coming up to strike his attacker. "Daniel." The familiar voice made him freeze. He lowered his arm. It was Sarah. Her eyes were red and tired, but she stared at him with a raw, hungry look. Daniel's expression instantly hardened. The weariness in his own eyes was replaced by a sharp-edged wariness, and he wrenched his arm from her grasp. "Sarah, you're still here." His voice was cold, as unforgiving as a glacier. She froze, and seeing the utter indifference on his face, she felt a sharp, hollow pain in her chest that took her breath away. Her expression was earnest. "Daniel, I came here to apologize." Daniel crossed his arms over his chest, his eyes filled with contempt. "Ms. Foster, to what do I owe the honor of such a humble apology? And whatever your reasons are, my answer will always be the same. No." His cold, final words were like an arrow to her heart. She stared at him, her expression stubborn. "Daniel, I know I did so many things wrong. I know I broke your heart. What I did was unforgivable. You have every right to hate me. I hope you'll give me a chance to explain." Daniel let out a cold laugh, one eyebrow raised in mockery. "You're really something else, Sarah. Did you give me a chance when I begged you to save my company? When I begged you to save my parents?" At his words, the color drained from her face. "My parents were murdered by Leo Miller. My family's company was on the brink of collapse. And what did you do?" he said, his voice low and tight with a hatred that seemed to come from the very marrow of his bones. "You protected a murderer. You forced me to apologize to the entire world to cover for him. You couldn't even leave my parents' funeral in peace. You had to destroy that too." He was growing more and more agitated, his chest heaving with emotion. He yanked up his sleeve, revealing the mottled, ugly scars beneath. "You haven't forgotten what you did to me, have you? How you had me burned with hot coals, then refused me the proper medical treatment, leaving me with these." He gestured to the scars. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and a wave of pure, agonizing regret washed over her. "Daniel, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Saw the—" He let out a harsh, barking laugh. "Saw the—" He pointed to his chest. "Will sorry fix the ribs that bear broke? Will sorry make these scars disappear?" Will sorry bring my parents back from the dead? He advanced on her, each step slow and deliberate. Sarah, life doesn't work that way. You can't just say you're sorry and erase everything you've done. When did you become so naive? Sarah opened her mouth, but no words came out. Everything he said was the truth, undeniable and irreversible. But the truth was too cruel for her to bear. Her lips trembled. Daniel, she finally whispered, if you can just forgive me, I'll do anything. Anything at all. Daniel looked at her pale, bloodless face, his own expression filled with a deep, visceral loathing. Sarah, I will never, ever forgive you. As long as I live. He paused. Between the two of us, this will not end until one of us is dead. His words were a final, fatal blow, leaving her feeling hollowed out, a cold wind whistling through the empty space in her chest. Her eyes went red, and she grabbed his hands, her own palms burning hot. Daniel, don't say that. We loved each other so much. I don't believe you could just stop loving me. Not this quickly. Her voice was a hoarse whisper, her eyes glistening like a wounded animal's. I know I was wrong. I really do. I'll do anything to make it up to you, I swear. Daniel, I'm only just now realizing that it's always been you. You're the one I love. Even a criminal gets a second chance when they get out of prison. Why can't you give me one? Just let me prove it to you. She had him backed against a wall, and he couldn't move. He frowned, turning his head to avoid her breath on his skin, his eyes filled with a deep, profound disgust. Sarah, for the love of God, just stop talking. You talk about love, but all you've ever done is hurt me. I can't take that kind of love. Her grip on his hands tightened, her nails digging into his skin. Daniel, I'll change. I'll change everything you don't like. Just please, give me one more chance. She pulled his wedding ring, the one he had torn from his own finger, from her pocket and held it out to him, her voice barely a whisper. I've kept it with me this whole time. Daniel, my heart is more honest than my head. I was unwilling to admit it. But I've always loved you. I was just so used to having you, I stopped listening to what my heart was trying to tell me. And maybe it's the same for you. Maybe all this hate has blinded you, and you're not listening to your heart either. You do still love me, don't you? After all these years, I don't believe you can just let it all go. She stared at him, searching his eyes desperately for any flicker of doubt, any last, lingering trace of love. Sarah, he sighed, and his voice was devastatingly calm. Let me be perfectly clear. I do not love you anymore. In fact, when I look at you now, all I feel is a deep, abiding hatred. I wish you were dead. His words struck her dumb. She stared at him, her face flushing, then turning a dark, dangerous shade of red. Impossible, she choked out, shaking her head frantically. How could you not love me? If you didn't love me, why did you wait for me for so long? Even when you knew I was obsessed with Leo, you wouldn't leave me. Daniel's gaze was calm, as placid as still water. Because I was a fool, he said quietly. I was foolish enough to believe that if I just waited long enough, you would eventually come back to me. But, Sarah, once a person's heart has changed, it doesn't change back. But I did come back, she insisted, her voice tight with desperation. It took me a little while, but I'm here now. Why can't you just turn around and look at me? Daniel looked at the desperate, almost savage expression on her face, and he found he could no longer remember the feeling of first falling in love with her. A mocking smile touched his lips. It's too late, Sarah. I regret it. I regret ever meeting you. I regret falling in love with you. If I had the chance to do it all over again, I would pray that we never cross paths. Your love is cheap. It's like something you found in the trash. You can treat it like a treasure for a while, but the moment you're tired of it, you can't wait to throw it away. Why are you trying to win me back with a heart that's so cheap and tarnished? Don't you know how much it disgusts me? The utter indifference in his voice was like a physical blow. Your affair with Leo was the talk of the town. I was a laughingstock, a fool waiting for you to throw me a scrap of affection. You'd be kind to me when it suited you, but the moment Leo was involved, you always chose him. Daniel looked her directly in the eye. Sarah, he said, each word precise and clear, you are not worthy of my love. His words struck her like a physical blow. She stared at him, dazed, a storm of unfamiliar emotions swirling in her eyes. A flicker of regret crossed her face, and her voice was thick with unshed tears. At first, I was just curious about Leo. I thought he was interesting, but then, I don't know, when I started to feel moved by him. He was trying so hard to achieve his dream, and I just wanted to help him. And then, I realized he was a fraud. that it was all just a show to get attention. Daniel listened in silence until she was finished. Then he asked, and the silence stretched on for a long time before she finally whispered, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The moonlight slanting through a nearby window illuminated the calm, impassive lines of his face. A wave of loss, so profound it was like a physical ache, washed over her. Desperate to bridge the distance between them, she surged forward, wrapping her arms around his waist and holding him tight, ignoring his attempts to push her away. She rose on her toes, trying to kiss him, her breath warm against his neck. "Daniel, I'm so sorry. I was wrong," she whispered. "Let's just put the past behind us. Please, just give me one more chance. Let me love you the right way." "Get off of me," he snarled. Daniel struggled to break free, but she clung to him like an octopus. He had been raised better than to strike a woman, but he was reaching his limit. At that moment, Jessica Sterling strode into the room. She yanked Sarah off of him and, without a moment's hesitation, slapped her hard across the face. "Stay away from him." The blow caught Sarah by surprise, sending her stumbling back against the wall. A thin line of blood appeared on her lip. Sarah wiped the blood from her lip, her eyes flashing with a vicious fire. She lunged, aiming to slap Jessica back, but Jessica sidestepped her easily. Sarah's face was a mask of pure fury, but she managed a twisted smile. "Jessica Sterling, who the hell do you think you are? This is between me and Daniel. It has nothing to do with you." Jessica's expression was lethally cold. "And who are you, Sarah?" "An ex-wife. That's all. Don't you think this pathetic, desperate act is a bit beneath someone of your station?" As if enraged, Sarah's pupils dilated. She clenched her fists and lunged again. "You bitch," she snarled. With another sharp smack, Jessica caught her wrist with one hand and slapped her again with the other. The two women began to grapple with each other, a tangle of limbs and fury. "Stop it. Both of you stop," Daniel yelled, but neither of them paid him any attention. He hesitated for only a second, then brought the side of his hand down in a sharp, precise blow to the back of Sarah's neck. She stumbled, turning to look at him, her eyes wide with disbelief as her vision began to blur. "Jessica, are you all right?" Daniel asked, immediately going to Jessica's side to check if she was hurt. The last thing Sarah saw before she lost consciousness was Daniel, gently and carefully, tending to another woman's injuries. A slow, creeping despair, cold and suffocating as a vine, wrapped itself around her heart. And in that final moment of clarity, she understood. He really, truly, didn't love her anymore. Leo Miller's case moved quickly through the system. Given the intense public scrutiny, the NYPD released a statement shortly after his formal arrest. It stated clearly that Leo Miller was being held on suspicion of premeditated murder. Additional charges, including desecration of a corpse and inciting a riot, will be processed concurrently. The official announcement sealed his fate. Leo Miller was going to prison, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Sarah was lying in a hospital bed when she got a call from him. She stared at the phone for a moment before answering. Sarah, you love me, don't you? You have to get me out of here. I can't go to jail. You can get me out on bail, or maybe medical parole." Leo's desperate, screeching voice grated on her ears. A wave of pure, unadulterated annoyance washed over her, and she hung up. He immediately called back, again and again. Her face a coal mask, Sarah blocked his number. Then she called her assistant. "Hire a lawyer for Leo Miller," she said. "The worst one you can find. Make sure he rots in prison for the next 20 years. Her assistant quickly agreed. "Oh, and one more thing. Pass a message to the warden at the detention center. Tell him to take special care of Mr. Miller. I don't want his time there to be too comfortable. Do you understand?" After hanging up, she opened a news app. The top story was a photo of Daniel and Jessica jointly reviewing plans for the new nuclear power plant. A sharp pain lanced through her heart. After Daniel had knocked her out, she had woken up in a hospital. He had simply called her assistant and had her taken away. In the 3 days she'd been there, he hadn't visited once. The last, secret flicker of hope in her heart had been completely extinguished. The fallout from the Leo Miller scandal continued to rock Foster Industries. The moment she was discharged from the hospital, Sarah threw herself back into her work, sleeping only 2 or 3 hours a night. The weight began to melt off her. One day, as she was poring over some documents, her assistant burst in, looking frantic. "MS. Foster, it's terrible. Our partners on the West Coast, they're dead set on terminating the contracts." She looked up. What happened? I thought I told you to keep them on the line until we could find a new environmental partner. A bitter, ironic smile twisted the assistant's lips. Ma'am, they've decided to partner with Anderson Corp and Sterling Enterprises instead. Sarah's hand froze, the tip of her pen leaving a dark blot of ink on the paper. Anderson and Sterling have apparently had a major breakthrough on their nuclear power project. Our former partners are very interested and have already signed a new deal with them. The assistant's words made her expression grow darker and more grim. And without Anderson Corp's core technology and data, our own project has stalled. The partners were already growing impatient. Sarah rubbed her temples, her voice low. All right, I understand. You may go. After her assistant had left, her ramrod-straight posture seemed to crumble, and she sank back in her chair. The Daniel of today was a complete stranger, nothing like the boy she remembered. He was running his company brilliantly, and he had been clever enough to ally himself with Jessica Sterling. With their two companies united, Foster Industries was losing ground daily. Sarah picked up the framed photo of the two of them, her fingers gently tracing the outline of his face. Her eyes were filled with a sharp, profound regret. She had been the fool. She had lost the most precious person in her life, and she had no one to blame but herself. She looked down at the smiling boy in the photograph, and her heart felt as if it were being torn in two. In a conference room at Anderson Corp, Daniel watched anxiously as the man across the table signed his name. A great weight lifted from his shoulders. An unbidden, brilliant smile spread across his face. The executive signed a last page and pushed the contract back across the table. Mr. Anderson, Ms. Sterling, the blond, blue-eyed man said with a smile, I look forward to a long and prosperous partnership. Daniel shook his hand, his own smile just as wide. The pleasure is all ours. After the new partners had left, Daniel could no longer contain his joy. He turned and pulled Jessica into a hug. We did it. We actually did it, he exclaimed. Jessica smiled at him, patting him gently on the back. Yes, you did it. Overcome with emotion, it took Daniel a moment to realize what he was doing. He pulled away, embarrassed. Her expression hadn't changed. It was your company's proposals and data that made this possible, she said, her voice cool and smooth. He waved a dismissive hand, still a little embarrassed. Without Sterling Enterprises' financial backing, none of this would have been possible. I wish my parents were here to see it. His voice was thick with regret. A flicker of sympathy crossed Jessica's face. Daniel, she said softly, I'm sure they would be very, very proud. He nodded, but there was a profound sadness in his eyes that didn't go away. She suppressed the thought and continued. Losing this contract will be a devastating blow to Foster Industries. Before she could finish her sentence, Daniel had pulled her into another hug. This time it was different. He held her tightly. Jessica, thank you. His sudden embrace took her by surprise. After a moment, her own arms slowly came up to wrap around his waist. Daniel felt the warmth of her arms around him, and a small, genuine smile touched his lips. It stood like that for a long time. When he finally stirred, his emotions back under control, she let him go. But the next moment, she took his hand in hers. He looked at her, surprised. Her hands were soft, and she held his as if it were something precious. The warmth of her touch was comforting, not unwelcome. Daniel, she said, her grip firm. Jessica, he stammered, his whole body tensing up. She looked at him, her expression serious. Daniel, I don't want to be just your friend anymore. I want to be by your side, officially. He was flustered, his heart skipping a beat. What are you talking about? Suddenly, she took his hand and pressed it against her chest, over her heart. He could feel its rapid, steady beat against his palm, and the warmth of it made him catch his breath. Daniel, do you understand what I'm trying to say? He was forced to meet her gaze. Her eyes were like a clear, deep pool, and looking into them, he felt all his anxiety and turmoil begin to settle. He started. I like you, Daniel, she said, her voice as soft and solemn as a prayer. You don't know this, but I've known who you were for a long time. My only impression of you was Sarah Foster's boy husband. Then, after your divorce, you suddenly appeared in my office, asking for a partnership. At first, I thought it was ridiculous. I thought you were completely out of your depth. She gave a small laugh. But as we spent more time together, I've seen how strong you are, how resilient and warm and kind. And I found I couldn't stop looking at you. Even then, I didn't quite understand what I was feeling. It was Sarah's reappearance that made me realize. When I saw her hurting you, I wanted to kill her. And I realized That's what it feels like to love someone. Jessica's gaze was steady and unwavering, filled with a sincere emotion that took his breath away. I want to be your girlfriend, Daniel. Not just your friend. I like you. I like you very much. You're the one who taught me what it feels like to care about someone so much it hurts. You're the one who made me want to build a life with someone. When I'm with you, nothing else seems to matter. So, will you be with me, with the intention of one day getting married? Daniel stood frozen for a long moment before he finally answered. Jessica, I don't know. A flicker of disappointment crossed her face, but then she smiled and released his hand. That's all right. I can wait. The moment her hand left his, he felt a sudden, sharp pang of loss. An impulse made him speak. Jessica, right now, all I can think about is finishing this project. And I just got out of a very painful relationship. I'm just not in a place where I can think about anything else. I understand, Jessica said, her voice gentle. And I'll help you. After what had happened, Sarah finally understood. Daniel was truly, completely done with her. The man who had always been there, waiting for her to turn back to him, was gone forever. She threw herself into her work, losing herself in it completely, until one day she collapsed from sheer exhaustion. As she drifted in and out of consciousness, memories of their time together played over and over in her mind. The sweet moments, the bitter arguments, they all ended with the same image, the cold, indifferent look in his eyes. When she woke up, Sarah was a different person. She no longer tried to see Daniel. Instead, she watched him from afar. She watched as he signed the new partnership deal, as he took his rightful place as the head of his family's company, and as he grew closer and closer to Jessica Sterling. Her heart ached with a pain like 1,000 tiny bites. Was this how Daniel had felt, watching her with Leo? Daniel's life, in contrast, was full and orderly. Several years passed in what felt like the blink of an eye. Anderson Corp was thriving, growing bigger and more successful every year. And, true to her word, Jessica had helped him every step of the way. They remained friends, but over time, something between them had quietly begun to shift. They had dinner together often, their conversations drifting easily from work to the small, mundane details of their lives. Whenever he faced a problem, she always had the perfect piece of advice. A quiet, unspoken understanding grew between them. Their easy, comfortable companionship was like a gentle tide, slowly wearing away at the walls he had built around his heart. On the day of Daniel's 30th birthday, Jessica appeared before him, holding a bouquet of flowers, her expression both gentle and serious. Daniel, she said. He had a feeling he knew what was coming, but this time, he didn't resist it. He simply looked at her. She was backlit by the sun, and her face was filled with a powerful, undisguised emotion. You told me you needed to finish the project first, and now you've done it. So, I want to ask you one more time. Will you be my boyfriend? Daniel looked at her. He could see the nervousness in her eyes, the hope, and the vulnerability. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face, and he nodded. Okay. A look of pure, unadulterated joy lit up her face. He stepped forward, took the flowers from her, and then took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. Let's go, girlfriend, he said, his voice light and happy. From a distance, hidden in the shadows, Sarah watched it all unfold. She didn't rush out to stop them. A strange, tickling feeling was rising in her chest, sapping all her strength. She coughed, a sudden, violent spasm, and spat a mouthful of blood onto the pavement before she collapsed. When she opened her eyes again, her doctor was looking down at her, his face full of pity. Ms. Foster, he said gently, it's terminal liver cancer. She accepted the news with a strange sense of calm. Daniel saw the announcement of Sarah's resignation as CEO of Foster Industries on the news. After that, it was as if she had vanished from the face of the earth. But none of that had anything to do with Daniel anymore. He and Jessica would walk forward together, hand in hand, toward a much brighter future.